Quentin Price adjusted the strap on his utility vest and looked out the wide viewport of the Orbital Diplomatic Academy's shuttle. The stars sat like cold fires in the black, unmoving as always, but today they watched something new. A human stepping into the most prestigious interspecies academic institution in the known galaxy. Quentin had been warned about the culture clash, the gravity shifts, the food that looked like it had feelings but none of it compared to the nervous buzz in his gut. "Name?" barked the squat, greenish administrator at the airlock checkpoint. Its skin glistened like wet moss and its eyes blinked sideways. "Quentin Price." "Earth delegate," he replied, holding out his ID chip. The alien scanned it, frowned though that might have just been how its face worked, and handed it back. "You're late." Quentin glanced at his watch. "It's synced with orbital time. I'm right on schedule." "Then your schedule is wrong." The gate slid open with a groan and Quentin stepped through. He adjusted his gait for the quarter-gravity corridor, bouncing slightly with each step. A few other students passed him, whispering in languages that sounded like wind chimes, throat clicks, or static. He nodded to one. It blinked all four of its eyes and floated away. He found his dorm room tucked into a rounded corner of the east wing. The door recognized his retina scan and opened. Inside, the room was minimal. A sleep pad, a foldable desk, and a sanitation pod. No windows, no privacy either, judging by the thin wall dividers. "Human!" came a sudden voice behind him. Quentin turned. An angular, metallic-hued alien stood in the doorway, its limbs long and symmetrical. It tilted its head. "I am Talon. I am assigned to cohabitate. You are fragile. I will be careful." Quentin dropped his bag. "Oh, good to meet you too." Talon stepped in, examined Quentin's knees. "Your joints bend backward. That is inefficient. Forward, actually. Even worse." Quentin sighed and tossed his jacket over the sleep pad. "This'll be fun." The next few days passed in a blur of orientation, planetary etiquette classes, and long lectures about interspecies diplomacy. Quentin was one of 4 humans among over 200 alien students. He tried to keep a low profile, taking notes on his tablet and avoiding the fermented kelp paste served in the cafeteria. On the 5th day, things changed. They were in Applied Crisis Tactics, a simulation course meant to prepare students for diplomatic emergencies. The instructor, a tall, brittle-looking being named Eno, had just begun explaining hostage negotiation techniques when Quentin reached into his bag for a stylus and felt a sting. "Ow!" He yanked his hand out. A long, narrow cut stretched across the webbing of his thumb and index finger. Blood welled up fast, dark and thick in the low gravity. Talon, sitting beside him, recoiled so fast he hit the back wall. "Emergency trauma. He is leaking vital fluid." Quentin grabbed a cloth from his bag, wrapped it around his hand, and stood. "It's just a paper cut." "Paper?" Eno asked, voice crackling. "You were wounded by organic fiber sheets?" "Yeah, I had some printed notes in my bag. The edge caught me." Another alien student, a round, gelatinous thing named Fell, began flashing orange. "He must be stabilized. The wound is exposed." Quentin shook his head. "Seriously, it's minor. I've had worse shaving." "You use blades on your face?" Eno had already activated the emergency response node. 2 mechanical drones zoomed in, scanning Quentin's hand. One spritzed a foam on the wound that hissed like soda. The bleeding had mostly stopped. "Please remain calm," one of the drones said. "You are in critical condition." "I am not." Talon approached carefully. "Will you lose the limb?" "What?" "No, it's a paper cut." Eno stepped forward. "You will be escorted to the medical bay. Class is suspended." Quentin groaned. "This is really not necessary." But the drones had already started guiding him toward the exit. In the medbay, after a thorough scan, the attending physician, a translucent-skinned being with bright blue veins, frowned at the test screen. "You have sustained dermal breach. Why did you not call for evacuation?" "Because it's literally just a cut," Quentin said. On Earth, this happens all the time. You are certain this is survivable? Completely. The physician stared at him. Remarkable. Once released with a bandaged hand and a lecture on bodily integrity, Quentin returned to his room to find Talon reorganizing the furniture. I have researched your injury. Your species lacks regenerative skin layers. Not exactly. Our skin heals, just not instantly. Still, you bled and continued functioning. That is disturbing. Quentin sat down, hand aching. It's not bravery. It's just how we do things. Talon observed him for a long time. I will report this to my planetary council. For a paper cut? For the record, your kind continues operating under damage. It must be known. Things didn't calm down after that. News of Quentin's trauma endurance spread like wildfire across the campus. He found himself the subject of hushed whispers, sideways glances, and at least one formal invitation to participate in a resilience study conducted by an aquatic species with a fascination for pain thresholds. In intercultural communication class, an insectoid student named Vrick raised a claw. Human Quentin, how do you maintain emotional stability while hemorrhaging? I wasn't hemorrhaging. It bled a little. I used cloth. You did not emit distress pheromones. Because I don't have those. There was a long silence. Your species is terrifying, Vrick concluded. Talon, sitting nearby, nodded solemnly. Confirmed. A week later, Quentin was assigned to a group project with Fel, Vrick, and a quiet avian student named Sherry. The assignment was to simulate a diplomatic response after a natural disaster on a neutral planet. They huddled in a simulation chamber surrounded by holograms of shattered buildings and panicked civilians. We must prioritize the injured, Sherry said, voice like a flute. Agreed, said Fel. Triage protocols. Quentin pointed at a pile of simulated rubble. We'll need to clear that to reach the trapped ones. As he reached down to lift a broken beam, the sharp edge caught the side of his arm. He winced. Not again, he muttered. Blood began to seep through his sleeve. Human Quentin has sustained a second trauma, Fel said, voice rising. Vrick backed away. He is bleeding again. It's not intentional, Quentin snapped, pressing pressure to the wound. I just moved too fast. It's shallow. Sherry looked horrified. You are injured and still speaking. You must rest. I will. After we finish this sim. Talon, who had been observing from the control room, stormed in. You must cease this. You are endangering yourself for academic performance. I'm not endangering anything. I'm just clumsy. A medical drone arrived, again spraying foam. Your flesh is fragile, Talon said. But your spirit is not. It is deeply unsettling. You keep using that word like it's a compliment. It is not. After being patched up and released again, Quentin was summoned to the Chancellor's office. Chancellor Roloth was a towering, crystalline being who shimmered under the overhead lights. She stared at him for a full minute before speaking. Your presence here has caused considerable confusion. I didn't mean to start anything. Your tolerance for injury is unexpected. Many of your peers find it unnerving. I'm not trying to show off. I'm just trying to get through the semester. Roloth leaned forward. You are not required to prove your resilience. We understand now. Quentin stood. I'm not proving anything. I just want to be treated like everyone else. Roloth's eyes glowed. You cannot be. You are human. And that, apparently, is unique enough. Back in the dorms, Talon left a small packet on Quentin's desk. Inside was a custom-fitted protective glove made of a flexible, self-healing material. For your note sheets, Talon said. Quentin smiled faintly. Thanks. I have also requested that your species be studied further. For science. Of course you did. Talon tilted his head. You are not unbreakable. But you are persistent. It is the same as strength. No, it's just life, Quentin said, pulling the glove on. But even as he said it, he realized he was walking a different line now. Not just surviving school, but teaching by accident. Teaching aliens what persistence really looked like, even if it came in the form of a paper cut. 3 days after the rubble incident, Quentin found himself staring at a tray of what he could only guess were edible roots floating in fermented gelatin. He nudged one with a fork. It wobbled like a wet balloon, then emitted a soft chirp. Talon observed from across the table. "Do you intend to consume that?" "Not if it's still making decisions. Sound does not indicate sentience." "Neither does cafeteria food," Quentin muttered. A few seats down, Fel was gently stirring its meal with a tendril. The gelatinous student had taken to watching Quentin with the same intensity one might reserve for a volatile experiment. Occasionally, it would scribble notes onto a floating tablet, mumbling about threshold anomalies. Quentin picked up a sealed ration bar from his jacket pocket and began unwrapping it. Talon leaned in slightly. "Your species relies heavily on pre-packaged sustenance. Because it doesn't move, scream, or blink, that is considered a disadvantage in most nutritional cultures." "Yeah, well, we've learned to lower our standards." Before Talon could dissect that further, a chime echoed through the hall. A tall, feathered administrator floated in, wings tucked neatly against its back, and signaled for attention. "Students assigned to the subarctic excursion, please report to the transit bay. Transit departure occurs in 6 minutes." Talon's feathers flicked upward. "We are assigned." Quentin paused mid-bite. "The ice planet thing?" "It is not a planet. It is a moon. Designation KLVA3. Mean surface temperature, -68. You were notified. I thought that was optional." "Nothing here is optional." Quentin sighed and shoved the rest of the bar into his mouth. By the time they reached the transit bay, the shuttle was already warming up, a low hum vibrating through the floor. Their team consisted of 7 students: Talon, Fel, Vrick, Sherry, a silent reptilian named Drox, a gaseous entity encased in a containment suit, and Quentin. The instructor for the mission, a pale-skinned, triple-eyed being named Havoc, paced near the boarding ramp. "You will be dropped at coordinates marked by the beacon," Havoc said. "The goal is to establish temporary shelter and maintain thermal stability for 48 standard hours. Communication with the station will be suspended during this time. Emergency extraction protocols will only be activated upon signs of irreversible physiological decline." Quentin raised a hand. "I'm sorry, irreversible?" Havoc turned. "Correct. Reversible injury is considered part of the educational experience." "Great. So frostbite's just hands-on learning." "No. Frostbite is disqualifying. You must avoid it." Inside the shuttle, the seats were built for 6-limbed creatures with flexible spines. Quentin wedged himself into one and tried not to pinch a nerve. The others settled in with less difficulty. As the shuttle broke orbit, Fel sidled up beside him, its form gently pulsing. "Human Quentin, do your internal organs shift position under extreme cold?" "Not unless something's gone really wrong. I will monitor this." The descent onto KLVA3 was smooth. Outside, the landscape was a sea of jagged ice ridges and frozen plains stretching in every direction. The sky was a dull lavender, the sun a weak glint behind thick clouds. They disembarked into the wind. Quentin's breath crystallized instantly. His thermal suit, a borrowed standard issue from the Academy, was already protesting with warning lights about undesigned tolerances. Sherry shook a small device at the snow. "There is a geothermal pocket beneath us. This is suitable." Within minutes, the group began assembling a dome structure made of collapsible panels and heat-retaining mesh. Quentin worked with Vrick to anchor the southern wall, his gloved hands already numb. "You were shivering," Vrick observed. "We do that. It's how we stay warm." Vrick continued hammering with its forelimbs. "Your methods are chaotic but adaptive. Thanks, I think." As the shelter took shape, Havoc signaled readiness and boarded the shuttle. "I will return in 2 cycles. Stay alive." The shuttle lifted off, leaving them in a swirl of snow. Inside the dome, the temperature stabilized just above freezing. Quentin peeled off his outer gloves, revealing frost-nipped fingers. Talon noticed immediately. "Your digits are discolored. Just poor circulation. I'll be fine once I get them moving." "You are experiencing necrosis?" "No. This is standard. Give me 10 minutes. Fel floated closer, its form dimming slightly. I suspect you possess internal countermeasures. My body tries, doesn't always succeed. We must document this. Please don't. Night fell quickly. The dome's light panels flickered to simulate a diurnal cycle, but the cold never quite left. Drox took first watch, its heat-resistant scales making it the best candidate. Quentin settled into his bunk, wrapped in 3 layers. Somewhere around the 20th hour, the emergency beacon on the dome began pulsing red. Quentin jolted awake, heart pounding. What's happening? Sherry checked the console. Pressure loss. A fissure opened under the west quadrant. They scrambled outside. A 3-meter crack had split the ice beneath their structure, pulling one of the support anchors out of alignment. The dome was listing slightly. Talon and Vrick began stabilizing the frame, while Fel and Sherry recalibrated the heat distribution. Quentin grabbed a tether cable and tried to reattach the anchor spike to a firmer section of ground. As he leaned forward, his boot slipped on black ice. He fell hard, catching himself on the edge of the anchor rod. The sharp metal tore through the outer layer of his suit and into the flesh just above his hip. He hissed through clenched teeth, staggering back upright. You are compromised, Talon said, reaching for his communicator. Don't, Quentin snapped. It's not deep. Your suit is breached. I'll patch it. Just help the others first. He stumbled toward the dome, unzipping the toolkit strapped to his thigh. The cold was already biting at the torn fabric. Inside, he sealed the tear with quick bond polymer, then checked the wound. Blood soaked through the thermal underlayer, sluggish and dark. A gash about 5 centimeters long, not gushing but deep enough to sting with every breath. He stripped the layer back, cleaned it with antiseptic foam, and applied a pressure bandage from the emergency pack. It wasn't elegant, but it would hold. He exhaled slowly, trying not to shiver harder. Fel hovered nearby, watching him with a kind of reverent horror. You are not vocalizing pain. I don't think the ice cares. You are leaking again. Still not the worst thing that's happened to me. Talon stepped inside, crouching beside him. You fell. You sustained blunt force trauma. And laceration. Yep. Now let's get the dome rebalanced. You are not medically cleared to continue. Quentin looked up. We're in the middle of a frozen wasteland. There is no cleared. There's just finished or not. Talon stood. Your species does not prioritize survival rationally. We do. We just define it differently. By the time the dome was restabilized, the temperature had dropped another 5 degrees. Sherry and Vrick returned from the perimeter sweep, visibly strained. We need to conserve power, Vrick said. We failed to locate another geothermal pocket. We'll make it, Quentin muttered, settling into a seated position near the heater core. His muscles ached and the bandage itched under the suit, but he wasn't willing to lie down yet. Fel drifted closer again. I do not understand how you are not in systemic failure, because I've got at least one more bad idea left in me. You are. Deeply unacceptable to biology. I've heard worse. The final night passed in a grim haze of silence and wind. By the time Havoc returned and the shuttle descended, Quentin's suit had stiffened in several places from dried blood and thermal patching. As they reboard, Havoc took one look at him and said, "Report to medical upon arrival." Quentin nodded, too tired to argue. Back at the station, the medical technician, a slender, striped being named Rishel, peeled the bandage off and examined the wound. You sutured this with field adhesive? Didn't have a needle. Rishel blinked slowly. You ruptured dermal layers, exposed muscle, and continued stabilizing a structure in sub-zero conditions. I wasn't going to let the dome collapse. Rishel activated a dermal regrowth unit and began scanning. You are aware a laceration of this depth typically requires partial immobilization. I'll hold still now. Rishel paused. You are either extremely brave or profoundly unreasonable. Quentin smiled faintly. Sometimes it's the same thing. Outside the med bay, Talon waited. As Quentin emerged, limping slightly, The alien handed him a small data tablet. What's this? A summary of the incident. I've submitted it to 3 cultural physiology journals. Fantastic. Now my frostbitten backside is a case study. You are redefining acceptable thresholds of function. I'm just trying to pass my classes. Talon nodded. That too is data. 3 days after the Kale VA-3 excursion, Quentin was cleared for full activity, though the medical team had insisted on monitoring his blood pressure for the rest of the term. He'd been compliant, mostly because Rishel had threatened to report him to the Chancellor if he skipped another scan. The regrowth patch on his hip itched like hell, but he'd stopped mentioning it after the 3rd time Fel asked if it was spreading. He was back in interplanetary conflict dynamics, seated uncomfortably due to the stiff padding between his skin and uniform. Instructor Hez, a being covered in soft, layered scales that shed with every movement, paced the front of the learning chamber with a magnetic pointer in one of its 4 hands. Today's exercise, Hez announced, will simulate asymmetric diplomatic escalation. You will be sorted into pairs. One of you will represent a dominant planetary authority. The other, a resource-deficient colony asserting independence under duress. Quentin sighed. Sounds like home. Hez's gaze flicked over. Human Quentin, you will partner with students Talon and Drox. You will represent the colony faction. Wait, 3-person teams? Unfair alliances are common in real scenarios. You may proceed to Chamber 5. Inside the simulation chamber, the temperature was neutral, the air filtered with faint traces of citrus, probably some environmental psychology trick to discourage aggression. The walls projected a fractured mountain range and an overhead sun that didn't radiate heat. Quentin leaned on the console representing the colony command unit, trying to ignore the persistent ache in his torso. Talon watched him from across a fabricated negotiation table. You are not upright. I'm leaning. It's a human tactic. Makes us look approachable. You are not. Drox's narrow pupils shifted between them without comment. The reptilian's breathing was shallow normal, from what Quentin remembered of its species briefing. Hez's voice filtered in through an overhead speaker. Begin simulation. Quentin tapped a control. A map of their fictional territory lit up in red. We've got 2 water sources, both under threat from your blockade. We're offering a trade deal. Medical supplies and mineral access for shared use of the northern reservoir. Talon's response was immediate. Unacceptable. You lack sovereign status. Your offer is invalid. Drox added, surrender your atmospheric rights and we will consider hydration as a humanitarian gesture. Quentin blinked. That's not a negotiation. That's extortion with paperwork. You are in no position to object. He folded his arms. Then you'll force us to mine unstable terrain which could cause a seismic collapse. You lose the minerals and we lose the mountain. Talon paused, recalibrating. You would risk ecological catastrophe to avoid compromise? You're not listening. I'm saying if you push us, we'll work with what we've got, even if it breaks everything. Drox typed something into his terminal. A simulated tremor rocked the chamber slightly. The display flickered. Has chimed in. Unexpected escalation recorded. Continue. Quentin leaned forward. We've rerouted power to emergency drills. You'll see mining operations resume tomorrow. If the mountain holds, we get our terms. If it doesn't, well, you'll be short a few billion credits in lost material. Talon's gaze narrowed. You were bluffing. I'm bleeding internally and still made it to class. Test that bluff? There was a long silence. Drox finally clicked a response. Conditional agreement. You will receive partial water access in exchange for environmental compliance audits. The simulation ended with a soft chime. The chamber lights returned to standard illumination. Hez's voice returned. Colony faction succeeded in securing a provisional treaty. Authority faction failed to predict irrational leverage. Debrief in Central Hall. As they filed out, Talon fell into step beside Quentin. You threatened your own territory to force compromise. I presented the reality of the situation. We didn't have leverage, so I made some. That behavior is categorized as brinkmanship. It often results in mutual damage. Yeah, and sometimes it gets people to finally listen. In the Central Hall has offered no congratulations. Instead, the instructor tapped a claw against its slate. Human Quentin's tactics are effective but unstable. Document the outcome, but do not emulate without review. Vrick approached from the side, holding a datapad. You use potential collapse as a negotiation point. On my world, that would be considered biological recklessness. On mine, it's just Tuesday politics. Later that evening, Quentin returned to his dorm. The lights were dimmed, ambient settings tuned to Talon's species' preference for low-spectrum wavelengths. Quentin dropped into his desk chair and peeled the dermal patch off his hip, wincing as the adhesive pulled at the healing skin. It was pink and tender, but closed. The ache had dulled to background noise. Talon emerged from the sanitation unit holding a data slate. I presented your negotiation logic to a theory group. They assumed it was satire. Was it at least well-received satire? They applauded. Then they requested further absurdist examples. Quentin chuckled. Tell them about traffic in Los Angeles. I do not know what that is. Exactly. Talon set the slate down. You risk personal harm in academic and simulated environments. This is becoming a pattern. Quentin rubbed his eyes. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I just don't see the point in sitting out while everyone else is learning. You do not process limits the way we do. No. We hit them, then figure out how to get through anyway. Talon was quiet for several seconds. Some fear you. I know. Some admire you. I'd prefer they stop. Still, the data is consistent. You adapt by injury. That's not a compliment, nor a criticism. A soft ping from the desk console interrupted them. A message from the Academy's administrative AI glowed on the screen. Participant Quentin Price has been selected for Cross-Species Resilience Panel. Attendance mandatory. Presentation required. Quentin groaned. Do they want me to bleed on stage or just talk about it? Talon read over his shoulder. Unclear. The panel was scheduled for the next morning. Quentin arrived in formal attire, standard black vest with the Academy crest over the heart. The hall was filled with students, faculty, and several off-world observers. Fell was seated near the front, gently vibrating. Vrick sat bolt upright, antennae twitching. Even Chancellor Roloth was in attendance, her crystalline form refracting the overhead lights like a living chandelier. Quentin stepped onto the platform. A holographic display activated beside him, showing a simulated diagram of human anatomy. He took a breath. I'm not a scientist, or a doctor, or even particularly athletic. I'm just a student who's been hurt more than once this semester, and apparently that's fascinating. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. He continued, humans don't have exoskeletons or instant healing or pain-dampening glands. We get sick. We bleed. We break things. But we also get back up. Not because we like it. Not because we're built for it. But because the alternative is giving up, and we don't do that if we can help it. He tapped the display. A medical scan of his wounded hip appeared, annotated for clarity. This is what happened when I fell on KLVA3. It hurt. I was scared it might get worse. But I knew the people around me were counting on me, and I wasn't about to let a little blood get in the way. A different slide showed a simulation capture from the negotiation exercise. This is what happened when I had no cards left. I bluffed with consequences because I already lived through worse. I knew the stakes and I knew the risk. That's not recklessness. That's experience. He paused. Pain isn't a badge. It's not proof of strength. It's just part of life. We don't chase it. We survive it. That's what we do. The room was silent for a long beat. Then Talon stood. Your actions remain irrational. Quentin grinned. Yeah, but you're still citing my homework. The laughter that followed was genuine and for once, not uncomfortable. When the panel ended, Chancellor Roloth approached. Your species is still being evaluated. I'd be worried if it wasn't. But you have clarified one thing. What's that? You are not durable. You are relentless. That may be more dangerous. He nodded. We get that a lot. Later, in the dorm, Quentin finally lay back on the sleep pad and let his muscles loosen. Talon adjusted the room's lighting, settling into his own rest alcove. You should request lighter coursework next term. Probably will. You will not. No. I won't. The lights dimmed fully. No alarms. No injuries. No crises. Just silence and the knowledge that, somehow, despite everything, he'd made it through.